right, welcome back. There's no time to waste, so I'm going to jump right in. If I switch back to Zeppelin, we currently have one job card, but right down here, we have a second version. And while we could figure out a way to consolidate both of these styles within a single blade component, often it's just easier to create two separate components, and that's what I'm going to do. So let's go to job card, and if I open up the sidebar here, I will duplicate it, and we'll call this one whatever you want, job card wide. How about that? All right, so let's see. We should work left to right. So first up on the left is the image itself, the employer's logo. Next, we'll have a div that wraps the employer's name and then the title and the salary requirements. So I should be able to get rid of this. And why don't we change this to some kind of anchor tag? And actually, we're going to talk more about this at the end of the video. But basically, how can we have multiple anchor tags within a card while still allowing the card itself to be clickable? It's a little bit tricky, but I'll show you how to do it. All right, so we have the employer name, the job title, the salary. And then finally, on the far right, let's just display the tags for now. And we can come back later if we have a little more time. But I'm trying to be as quick as we can here. All right, that's the general shape. All right, so of course, there's more to do, but let's see this in the browser. So here's our main welcome page where we have the tags and then the recent jobs. I'm going to grab this div here, and we'll have a new one, this time for job card wide. All right, and why don't we do 3? But this time we'll have space between them vertically. So maybe, I don't know, space Y3. All right, let's have a look. So we come back to the browser and whoa, we have a gigantic image. And this is probably related to Flexbox. It's always Flexbox. So let's fix it. I can command click here. And one thing you learn if you've used Flexbox for a long time is you want to be careful about things like images or buttons that are direct children of a Flex container, which is what you see here. You always end up with weird issues. So for example, if I just wrap this within a div and switch back, we've solved that problem there. Okay, but it still doesn't look great because we are using flex call. This time we want a flex of row, and I don't want the text to be centered. There we go. All right, next up, let's tweak some of the spacing. So I'll start by saying in between each of the flex items, let's add a gap of about 6. And then with that in mind, if I switch back to the welcome view, I'm going to increase the space, the vertical space in between each of the wide cards up to 6, a little more breathing room. All right, come back, and that looks a little better. All right, next, I want this section itself to flex, expand as much as it can, and that will push the tags to the far right. So back to our wide card, and we'll say right here, flex 1. Flex to fill the available space, or shrink if it needs to. All right, good. Next, the employer logo is a little bit wider than 42 pixels. I think it's 90. Let's double check. Back to Zeppelin. And let's see, I can click right here, and sure enough, 90 by 90. Save it. Switch back, and that looks better, but that blue is killing me. So you know what I'm going to do? I'd rather reference an actual image, or at least a dummy image. So I will use a different placeholder surface, and let's see if I can remember it. It's picsum.photos, and I believe, once again, I can just pass the dimensions here. There we go. Now we have a random image, but notice it is repeated for each item there. Ideally, I want them to be unique for each job. So there is a way to do that. I believe we pass seed and then some kind of identifier. So then the image Picsum Photos returns will always be unique to that ID. So if I come back and refresh, well, they're all using the same identifier, so we see the same photo there. So all we have to do is make it unique. Once we have actual jobs in the database, we will reference the ID of the job. For now, I'm just going to say, give me a random number between 1 and, a massive number. Now, if we come back, we have some unique images there, and that's fine for a demo. All right, back to Zeppelin. Next, we have this gray text. Now, I happen to know the hash is C2, 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 but let's see if Tailwind has something close. Let's go with gray 600. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe 700. That's too much. How about 400? You know what? Close enough for me. I'm not going to squawk. Okay, so while I'm here, notice the font is different. from what we see on Zeppelin. So as it turns out, this pixel positions demo is using the same font that we reference on Laracasts, and that comes directly from fonts.google.com. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to visit our layout file, and at the very top, I will save us some time and just paste it in. And yeah, all of this is, again, coming from fonts.google.com for this font here, Henkin Grotesque. Is that how you pronounce it? And we're getting a handful of weights if we need them. Cool. So now I want to reference this within Tailwind. So here's what I'll do. I'll open our tailwind.configuration file, and I'm going to extend the font family object to include a new one. We'll call it Henkin Grotesque, and then I will reference a font tree. So ideally, I want that font we pulled in with a fallback to sans serif if it didn't load for some reason. Okay, so now, yeah, once again, Tailwind will reload, and I can now reference this as a utility class. I'll show you. Let's go into our layout file, and let's set it site-wide on the body. So I'll say font Henkin Grotesque, and let's see it in the browser. Yeah, there we go. Looking good. All right, so let's continue with our wide job card. Job card wide, and yeah, of course, the title itself should be bold. It should be large. And then for the paragraph, yeah, this is going to be very similar. I also want it to be small and gray. Okay, so if we switch back, yeah, that's looking fairly good. But notice how everything is grouped at the top. Ideally, I want to push the salary to the bottom of this section down here, like you see in the image. So maybe we should do this. Maybe once again, flex to the rescue. Let's set a display of flex, but I want it in the direction of a column. And then for this last item, I will set margin top auto to push it down as much as it can go. And now, yeah, that looks better. All right, next, the title could probably be a little larger, and I want to push it down from the salary. So how about push it down, margin top of 3, maybe? And then let's change it to text extra large. Yeah, that's looking reasonable. Okay, now let's move on to some other miscellaneous things. At the moment, we have 2 different versions of our employer logo, but of course, we want to consolidate them. So this once again sounds like a good use case for a dedicated component. So I'm going to copy this and create a brand new one. We'll call it employerlogo.blade.php, and I'll paste that in. And again, don't forget, ultimately, we will update these components to accept, for example, the employer object, and then we will reference it. But for now, once again, everything is static. All right, so let's update this with our new component, employer logo. And then I will switch to our standard job card, and I can update it here as well. Employer logo. But now we do have one issue. You'll remember if I switch back, the width in this case should be 42, but within our component, it's set to 100 by 100. So now we have messed up our layout, as you see there. Okay, so why don't we do this? Let's accept a prop, an initial prop for the width. And that will default to 90 pixels, but if you want to override it, you can. Okay, so then I can swap this out with the width. And I believe if we just provide a width, it will be treated as a square. So we wouldn't have to do a height or something like that, duplicate it. We should be able to provide just one and it'll work. Okay, so now back to job card, I could say width is, 42? Give that a shot, switch back, and now we have 2 different sizes for our job cards. All right, next up, I'd like to do a little more work with the tags. They don't look that great. If I switch back to Zeppelin, let's zoom in a little bit, and we can see this text is actually very small. If I open the sidebar, I can see it is set to, about 10 pixels. What do we have currently? I'll go to Computed and look for font size. It's set to 12. Okay, so that's extra small, and I don't think Tailwind goes below that, so why don't we create a custom size? Back to our Tailwind configuration file, and let's override font size, and we'll have, how about, if we already have an extra small, let's do 2 extra small, and I want this to be 10 pixels. I could hard code this, or I could set it in rims. So if I do some math, let's take 10 pixels divided by the base font size, and we get 0.625. All right, let's use it. Back to job card, actually into tag. And yeah, let's see if we can update it to text to XS. Come back. And yeah, now it's just a little bit smaller. All right, let's keep going. I would like this to be bold. And maybe we should give it a little more padding on the left and right. All right, back to Arc, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, now I'm thinking our font might be a little bit too heavy. So if I compare this to Zeppelin, yeah, notice that here, even for the navigation area, the font is set to bold, but it's much softer than what we currently have in Arc. So let's do this. Let's go back to our layout file. And yeah, why don't we remove both 800 and 700? We'll stick with 400, 500, and 600 weights. So if I switch back, yeah, that's much softer than it was before. All right, next up, you'll see that we have some hover styles if your mouse is over a card. It looks like the title goes blue and the border is blue. So let's go into Job Card, and we can say, well, by default, we have a border, but maybe we hide it. Let's make it transparent. But you hover over the card, and we make it border blue. And again, I'm just going to eyeball it, maybe 800. Come back, and yeah, close enough. All right, but now I want to make the title blue as well. So how do we do that? Well, you can't just add hover styling to the H3 because then you would only see the blue if you hover over the H3. And that's not what we're doing here. So a way to solve this with Tailwind is to apply a class of group. And then on the H3, you can listen for when an element with that class is hovered over. So I could say, for example, if you hover over the group, meaning this parent element, then I want to set the text for this to also text blue 600. And I think that will solve the problem. Yeah, cool. So actually, real quick, while we're here, if I switch back to Zeppelin, you'll notice that the salary is pushed down a little bit and much, much smaller. I want to fix that pretty quickly while we're here. So for the title, let's make it bigger, like XL. And yeah, then for the salary, we will make it maybe small, and then I will push it down a little bit. So I'll set some margin top to push it down from the title. Come back. Yeah, better, but the salary is still too bold. Let's see. Oh, that's because we applied it to the div. Okay, let's apply it only to the title, and then the salary itself can be a base level. Yeah, and that's looking a little better. Okay, but next I would also have to apply those those border styles to the wide card as well, and that's not ideal. But yeah, let's just see what that would look like. Notice I'm doing a bit of duplication here, which is a sign. So let's go to Job Card Wide, and I'm going to paste those styles in here. And then for the video producer, group hover, text blue, 800. You know what? I think I used the wrong ones here. Yeah. Notice I have 600 and 800 up here. We want those to be consistent. Okay, so now if I hover over it, that looks good. Or maybe it's too dark. Maybe it should be 600, but we're not going to get stuck in the weeds here. You get the idea. Now, once again, if you want to transition these, so it's a nice, smooth transition from transparent to blue, do this once again. Set transition, colors, duration, and let's make it really long so you can clearly see it. So come back and, well, the title isn't quite right, but notice the border is definitely transitioning in. Yeah, I guess I forgot the title has to receive the same thing. Transition colors, duration, and this time let's make it much quicker. 1/3 of a second often seems to be a good value to go with, 1/3 of a second or 300 milliseconds. Yeah, if you like that, it's just a little bit smoother. Okay, so once again, we'd have to do the same thing for the Job Card Wide. This feels kind of gross, doesn't it? Then right down here, the exact same thing, and now that works as well. It's not the end of the world, but it seems like we could have more than one card. Well, we already do, but in a real pixel positions application, we could have many cards that have this styling. They're almost like panels, or you can call them cards if you want. I often call them panels. So with that in mind, could this be a candidate for a component? Let's give it a shot. Create a component called panel, and I'm going to use a split view here. Let's take the wrapper here, and then we can have a slot like so. All right, let's see how that looks. If we took that route, I could swap it out with our X panel component. So now we've effectively consolidated all of those styles. So let's see how Job Card Wide looks. Yep, no difference. Good. Next, I can go to job card, and we're going to do the exact same thing. However, I want to make sure, is there any unique classes here? So did we duplicate the classes? Here, I'm just going to paste this in. Yeah, we actually have a couple differences. And yeah, that would be the flex information and the gap. Okay, so that should be excluded. All right, let's do this. I'm going to change this to X panel. There we go. And then I'll get rid of everything except for the unique parts. So it sounds like the unique parts are that within the panel, we want to display a flex. So get rid of, yeah. And then if I click through to panel, this is unique to job card wide, so I don't want to assume it, but everything else should be the same. All right, so job card wide, pass these in. And then, of course, we've learned if we want to merge these, well, we would have to do something like this. And I'll show you a little shortcut. So up until this point, we've been saying attributes merge, and then we set the default class like so, and that would do the trick. However, if we just call attributes as a function, it's going to merge it. So this is sort of a shorthand for attributes merge. And yeah, that would work. Also keep in mind, if you want, you can do things like this, where you could open up PHP blocks like this, and then you could say default classes, or keep it even simpler, classes. Now you can reference that variable within your template here. So you could do something like this just to make it a little easier to consume, right? Especially on a low resolution like I have, those utility classes go off the screen very quickly. So this is an option if you want. All right, so back to Arc. And yeah, notice now we have the exact same thing as we had before, but we have consolidated those stylings within a panel component. Pretty cool. So now, for example, if we go back to welcome, if we were to add a new section for something totally different, I could open up a panel and say, hello there, whatever you want, and you'll see it will receive those same styles. And yeah, it seems like that's a repeating pattern for this site, so it makes sense to extract it into its own component. Let's get rid of it. All right, so now, yeah, these tags are way too small. They're fine for a job card, but if I switch back to Zeppelin, yeah, you can see they're much larger here. Okay, so it sounds like, we should make this configurable. Let's go into tag, and yeah, let's do this. Let's accept a prop for the size, and maybe we'll accept like a base or normal. How about base? But also maybe a small size or something like that. Okay, so then we could do something like this. Open up a PHP block, and we could say, well, if size is base, then use these classes. But if the size is small, then use these other classes. Okay, so let's figure out what our base class is here. We'll do the exact same thing. At the top, I will have our CSS classes, but then, yeah, the text size and the padding should be unique based on the size. So how about if the size is small, then I will append to classes, and I'm just going to grab these here, all right? And then what else? Text to XS. So those are the classes that are unique to a small size, at least so far. Clean that up. Okay, now I just have to figure out what the classes should be for the base level. And I'm just going to eyeball it. Maybe text small, and then I will increase the left and right padding to 5. And yeah, maybe that's enough. By the way, notice I am including a space so that when we concatenate, they aren't grouped with the previous class there. Okay, so now I'm going to reference them. And yeah, that would be one way to handle this. All right, so our default size is base. So if I switch back to Arc, yeah, those look good now, but these are now too large. So we just switch back to job card, and I will update these to say, all right, set a size of small. And then I will create 3 of those. All right, and let's even update these to look a little more real. Backend, front end, manager, something like that. There you go. We have our small tags and our larger tags. All right, back to Zeppelin. Last up, well, we'll still have some form work to do later in the series, but all I want to do to wrap up this video is add the section at the top. Let's find you a great job followed by an input. Back to welcome. This will be its own section at the top, and it's not a standard section heading, so it's more of a banner. Let's find your next job. I already know it's going to be bold and maybe pretty large. How about 4XL? And then below it, I want a form. So we will handle the logic for the form later. But yeah, within it, we'll have an input type of text. We'll give it a placeholder to give you an idea of what to search for. How about web developer? And then for the classes, let's see. If I zoom in, all right, so we have a dark gray background. There's a border. It's rounded. There's a good bit of padding there. All right, let's see if we can make this work. Make it rounded. Let's set a background color of, again, let's use alpha. How about background of white, but only at 5%? And that way I could do a border of white at 10%. So just a little bit larger. And then we know we want a good bit of padding on the left and right and the top and bottom. It's a pretty large input. All right, let's have a look in Arc. And yeah. So next, let's align it to the center. And you know what? Maybe, can I just set text center to the section itself? Yeah, that looks good. Let's make the input wider. So, how about set width to full? Yeah. And actually, just in case on your screen you're not seeing this overly well, let's increase it temporarily so it's crystal clear where we are. All right, we want to push it down. So let's say class MT6. And then it's a little too wide, so we should set a maximum width. Now, Tailwind includes a handful of maximum width classes. I'm not sure which one to do. Typically, I would just eyeball it. So here's large, here's extra large. Extra large looks pretty good to me. Okay, finally, if we check Zeppelin, it is pushed down just a little bit. Let's do, well, we already have spacing in between, don't we? So I can't set margin. Let's do this. How about padding top of 10? Yeah, and that pushes it down. And then also we should push, let's find your next job down from the navigation area a little bit as well. So maybe, I don't want PT10, maybe a little bit less, PT6. And yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have a lot of Laravel specific work to do. Although this is Laravel specific, we are working with blade components and refactoring things and figuring out how it works with utility classes and stuff like that. And yeah, I think this is looking pretty good. Okay, so let's bring this back to background white of 5. And yeah, clearly there's a lot more tweaking we could do in real life. I'm sure there's a bunch of hover styles and focus styles we've missed. But again, for a demo where you're working along, I think this is pretty good. All right, so very good job. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is, but in my head, whenever I have videos like this that are almost exclusively HTML and CSS based, I feel like the programmers among you are thinking, come on, fast forward. This isn't what I signed up to Laracasts for. Move on to the next part. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Maybe some of you enjoy watching it. But either way, it doesn't matter because we're done. In the next video, we're going to do a lot. We're going to build up the whole architecture for this project. So that means we will be generating eloquent models. We will whip up seed data and factories. We'll work with relationships. I will introduce you to testing. There's a lot to do, and I hope we can pull it off. So yeah, that's it. I will see you in the next video. Stay tuned. What? Pull to show outro.